beginning with the learning outcomes, the first the first learning outcome, as very clearly laid out in your syllabus booklet, is that at the end of this paper, you should be able to evaluate and integrate the knowledge and skills acquired in the previous levels, plus whatever you have learned at this level. Now, this is the crust of what the paper is about. Indeed, the paper picks its name from that critical learning outcome, integration of the knowledge. You should be able to integrate, for example, finance knowledge with tax knowledge, with strategic planning knowledge, and propose a workable solution. You should be able to integrate financial and non-financial information, as an example, and recommend practical solutions to organizational problems. That's the first learning outcome. Number 2 is about professional solutions. You should be able to develop and deliver. The first 2 words are key, because it's not just about delivering, but also how you, it's not just about developing, but also how you deliver the solutions. Okay, and the delivery brings into thought issues about how you present your findings. Okay, later on we shall be talking about presentation skills, but that is a question of delivery. How would you deliver your solutions? If you've developed a solution, a professional solution, that this firm should be, for example, valued using the earnings method, how would you deliver such a solution to the user? Okay. How would you deliver that? How would you present that as a solution to someone who is looking at a company valuation? Are you going to tell him about estimation of cash flows and how you discount the cash flows and how you have a positive NPV? How are you going to deliver that message to the person? So the development and delivery of the professional solutions is a key learning outcome. Reporting solutions to business problems in an understandable manner. That is still a question of reporting. Number 4 is about judgment on advanced reporting issues. Judgment is another key skill that we're going to spend some time discussing. We want to see maturity from you. We want to look at how you evaluate issues and make recommendations or take a stand. How do you judge? What is your level of maturity when it comes to judgment? Okay, that is learning outcome number 4. Number 5 is on assessment of taxation issues and offer tax planning advice. That is pretty straightforward. And then treasury solutions for financial planning purposes. This is again general financial management and financial planning advisory services that you should be able to handle at a high level. Advice on corporate governance. Corporate governance is a very, very key theme, and rarely do you have an exam that does not, in one way or another, tap into corporate governance. So you should be able to evaluate corporate governance issues and advise on appropriate interventions. Demonstrate an understanding of the current issues affecting businesses. If you look back and you know, select maybe 5 papers, maybe 4, 5, whatever, even if you extend them up to 10, you will note that most of the time, the exam has either a question or something that speaks to the current affairs around the exam date. Okay? I will tell you, for example, that in the last exam there was something on IFRS 16. That's a new standard, I'm sure you're aware. The other sitting there was something on IFRS 9. The other sitting there was something about a failed bank, and that was the time we had the Crane Bank debacle. We've had issues around, I think, Brexit. You've heard of Brexit? We've had issues around general topical things happening in our economy, okay, including basic things like budgeting and related discussions. Issues around interest rate management or impact of interest rates. So the paper will most times pick on two current affairs and throw in one or two requirements. So you must demonstrate your appreciation and understanding of the current issues affecting businesses. So generally, in terms of the learning outcomes, you must demonstrate the ability to deliver professional solutions as a CPA, whether in public practice or in employment. Okay. Public practice means you offering maybe audit, external audit services, or general tax advisory services, or general accounting services, but as a practitioner. But you could also be in employment. And then picking on from those two roles, the exam will normally ask you to assume a position either in an advisory capacity, professional advisory capacity, or a position in a management role, maybe as a CFO, maybe as a head of audit. But in either case, you must be able to deliver professional solutions. So, what are the areas of focus? Of course, all elements of the CPA syllabus, which you've run through over the years, from level 1 up to level 4. But in addition to those three items are key. Current affairs and topical issues. I've given you an example. Today there is talk about Brexit globally. At some point we had the global financial crisis. I think I saw that in the exam. That's a long time ago, 2008, 2009. We had a time of economic problems here. That was after the 2011 elections. And I remember seeing questions on issues regarding interest rates, issues regarding inflation, and similar matters pertaining to the economic aspects at the time. So the current affairs are always an issue. Matters of national concern, just like the current affairs, I think you should need to take note of. And the general economic and business trends. Okay? The things like regional integration, those are topical things that you should never miss as you prepare for the exam. But that is all in addition to the technical areas we've covered over the years of study on the program. So how should we prepare? How should we plan to spend our preparation time? Okay? You need to look at the areas you went through in the course of study. And you shouldn't only focus on those things you didn't like, or only those things you liked. So I'm advising that you look at the areas you enjoyed. You will be here and you always thought that you are good at numbers. You might be here and you feel that your strength is in theory. So you like things like auditing, you like strategy, you like, the theoretical aspects of the paper. Others will say, I like numbers, I don't like theoretical discussions. I'm quite sorry, because both of them are relevant. So you need to go back and look at the areas you enjoyed, look at the areas you didn't like, especially those that you thought are irrelevant. You might have been wondering why you're studying strategic planning, and yet you intend to go into private practice. You don't intend to be in employment. Well, if your lecturer didn't tell you, strategic planning is relevant, whether you're in a corporate setting or whether you're running your own business. Okay? And that means it's relevant for purposes of this paper. So look at those areas, revisit them. Okay? Consider the professional and business implications of current affairs and topical issues. Okay. You can't run away from current affairs and topical business issues. And you need to pick interest in particularly the implications from a business perspective. Okay? If there are tensions between Uganda and Rwanda today, what do those mean for a business, for example? That is a scenario that you can get in this paper. Because it is a current issue. It is a matter that is affecting the regional politics and business dynamics. You know, it's a geopolitical factor, but a relevant current affair. So take interest in those elements and particularly assess the professional or business implications of such developments. There are certain areas that over the years seem to be quite popular. And I think the popularity is coming from what is expected of the CPA. And you have some of them on the board. Accounting and financial management, for example, you can't be a CPA if you can't deliver accounting solutions, because that is the core of the profession. Financial management, that is a core area. It's a core deliverable for a professional accountant. Issues around risk management. Risk management is a highly topical consideration these days. Okay? Risk as a discipline. It's actually emerging as a profession that stands on its own. So these are areas you definitely would want to think about, because they are critical and they are key deliverables for a CPA. Audit and assurance. Internal audit. Surely you must be able to advise on such a critical aspect. Corporate governance, I have already talked about this. How an entity is managed, be it in a corporate setup or in a family arrangement, it still remains a relevant matter of interest to an accountant. Human resource management, general trade, commerce and marketing. These are areas that, if you look back and look at past papers, these are areas that are always in those papers. So if I were you and I'm preparing, I would definitely flip my notes. I would flip my my technical materials covering some of those areas, so that I'm well grounded to deliver as a professional on those areas. I'm highlighting them because they seem to be central to what a CPA does, whether you're in employment or in public practice. Now, I want us to move on to the key skills, the key skills sets that you must develop. And this is what the examiners will be looking out for in your scripts. The most critical skill is analytical abilities. Yesterday I was here and I was talking to the business policy group, and I told them that analytical skills are equally important at that level. Okay, the same skills are prominently necessary at this level. You must improve on your analytical skills. Okay, some of the things that the examiners note, and I don't know whether, did you read the examiners' reports? Has any of you ever read the examiners' reports? I expected a chorus answer. Apart from Jack, has any of you ever read? Do you take time to look at those reports? Please pick interest in those reports. Those reports, I think, are loaded onto the students' page on the website. Okay. Now, I will tell you that the biggest problem, if you read those reports, the biggest problem that the examiners point out is poor analytical skills. Poor analytical skills. Okay? Some of you or some students reproduce the facts of a case study. Okay? And then they say, that is my analysis. Appendix 1, analysis of the management issues. But when they read the said appendix, the said analysis, it is a restatement of facts. It's a summary of the case study. That is not analysis. That is a summary of the facts of the case study. So what is analysis? What do we mean by analytical skills, and what is it that we expect from you? One, look at the case study in totality. Don't pick on one small issue and forget the context within which this issue is being highlighted. Okay? Don't pick on one issue and forget the context in which it is being highlighted. I'll give an example. The scenario may be reflecting a decision, a pending decision. A pending decision, say, on maybe entry into a market. A pending decision on maybe acquisition of the farm. You want to acquire another entity as part of your strategic interventions. And there is debate in the boardroom on what should be done. Okay? Of course, it might be a very good decision. But you cannot focus only on the boardroom discussion and forget things like how such a deal would be financed. Usually you have numbers. The examiners give you numbers. X financial statements will be attached. Okay? A recommendation or an assessment of such a decision that does not consider the financial position of the firm will not bring out good analytical skills. If one of you just focuses on the boardroom discussion, that the CEO is forceful, that the CEO is autocratic, and he is forcing through his decision on acquiring another company, yes, you will have put up an argument. But that argument will be a lot more sensible if you bring in the financing component, because that's why the examiner will have given you the numbers. And I will bet that when you check on the numbers, you'll probably find that the company, the financial position is not in good shape, that the capital structure is poor or is not good. So a good analytical student will bring the boardroom discussion and blend it with the numbers and say, this cannot work. Why? Because one, it does not have the support of the other management team, but two, and equally important, is the fact that the firm does not have funding for an acquisition, if that is the matter at hand. So what can they do? Maybe they can get shareholders to inject more money, okay? But possibly debt is out of the question if the numbers, if the debt ratios are very, very bad. That is the analysis we want to see. Look at the case study in totality, not in isolation. Information will be scattered across, and you need to gather that information and make your point by relating the scattered bits and bits. Relate the qualitative and quantitative information. Okay? Relate the quantitative and qualitative information. I've given one example, but you can have so many other examples. Okay? Every time you have numbers, those numbers can be used in your discussions. But some students think that when you have numbers, then you must only talk about the conventional ratios. Okay? So when there is no question about ratios, people think that, this was useless information. I'll tell you no. There is no way you can fail to use numbers in a strategy discussion, irrespective of the questions they've given you. At least it will be in your conclusions. At least there will be a comment in your executive summary. At least there will be a comment on the financial position in your recommendations, because the recommendations will highlight interventions. So there is no way you can tell me that you've been given a set of financial statements, and simply because there is no question that asks for assessment of the financial position and the financial performance, the numbers are therefore irrelevant. I would say no. Absolutely. At this level, I would say no. So if you've not used such numbers, because there is no question on assessing financial performance, then you have not done a good job. I can guarantee you. Okay? So use the qualitative and quantitative information to support your arguments. Bring out all perspectives to an issue at hand. In other words, evaluate the issues. Most of the time, the scenarios you get have got a bit of contradiction here and there. You are unlikely to get a scenario that is straight one side focused at this level. Usually, the scenarios require a little bit of debate. So you must evaluate the issues. Look at both sides of the argument. Okay? Look at both sides of the argument. That is the evaluation that we want to see, and that speaks to your analytical capabilities. And then, of course, support your arguments. Support your arguments and deal with the hanging questions. Don't leave things hanging in your responses. Consider relating the causes and effects as you do your analysis. In other words, ask the question, why? If this is what is happening, why is it happening? Or put differently, if this is happening, what are the effects? If the CEO is autocratic, so what? That's what the examiners want to see. Alternatively, now this is something you'll find prominently featured in your study materials. Please make sure you get the study materials. You may start with a conclusion. Not a conclusion of the entire scenario, but a conclusion on a fact. Okay? The proposal to acquire XYZ Limited is not ideal. That is a conclusion. And then you go ahead and explain why that conclusion, why you are arriving at that conclusion. Okay? The proposal to acquire XYZ is not proper. Why? One, the company is short on funding. Two, the shareholders are unwilling to commit additional equity. Three, management does not seem to favor that approach. So stakeholder support is inexistent. Four, there is bound to be resistance. You're justifying what you think should happen. That is the approach you see in bullet 3, which is concluding on an issue and then explaining why you're making that conclusion. The other approach is to say, explain the facts, or explain why it's not an issue, rather why it's not appropriate, and then conclude at the end. You say, XYZ Limited is short on funding, the ratios show a high debt ratio of maybe 70%. 3, the bankers have said they're not willing to give them more money. 4, the sales are falling, so the revenues and the cash flows are not good. 5, the shareholders are not happy with the proposal, so there is resistance. Therefore, you conclude that the proposal is not proper. Those are 2 different approaches that are both acceptable. But the most important thing is that you must justify what your position is. Okay? Lastly, on analytical skills is the question of recommendations. Recommendations. When you read the examiner's reports that I have referred you to, you will find the examiners noting that sometimes students, of course, maybe your lecturers tell you that you must have a section of recommendations, which is right. But recommendations that are not coming from your discussions, they are as good as useless. Okay? Recommendations that are not coming from your discussions are not of any use. So you have 2 possible approaches. You may discuss issues and make note of possible recommendations or interventions for the issues as you discuss them. That is one approach. The other approach is to have a whole section of recommendations at the end of your write-up. Okay, both approaches are fine. But the most important thing is that whatever you recommend must have logically flowed from the discussions that you had. Okay? If you've not discussed anything about staffing, how then do you start talking about dismissal of people? Okay? How? So, the question of recommendations feeds directly into the analytical discussion. Your recommendations must flow from your discussions. In other words, the recommendations must be justified by the discussions you have presented. Conceptual skills. You must demonstrate ability to comprehend complex organizational issues and propose appropriate solutions. You must be able to identify the root cause of these problems that organizations are faced with. The scenarios that you get in this paper try to approximate real practical situations. And that will show that you have good conceptual skills. Judgment. Now this is a very, very important area, and I hinted on it at the start. The level of your judgment, the level of maturity in your judgment is very, very critical. And I will use scenarios to demonstrate this point. I know we've all done ethics, haven't we? We've all done audit, right? And we know that when you are appointed an auditor, there are certain things you do, right? Including checking on whether you are professionally competent. Okay? Do you have the expertise of subject matter? But even legally, are you legally competent to conduct an audit? In other words, do you have a practicing certificate? The other thing you have to do is to contact the previous auditor. Not so. Displaying commercial awareness. You are making a sound commercial decision that does not contradict your ethical principles. Even if the institute came for an inspection, they will find that you escalated the matter to the steering committee, that you escalated the matter to the managing director, and the managing director came in to guard against the threats to your independence. That you instituted measures to protect your independence from a CFO who was pushing you to reduce the provisions. That is sound ethical and commercial awareness, which is a question of judgment that you have displayed. A straight no for a new firm is not wrong, but it doesn't show good commercial awareness. Am I communicating? Good. Balanced arguments, you must, I think we've talked about this already. You need to balance the arguments, look at both sides of the discussion, and put up a stand. Rarely do you have one single option. Most of the time you have a variety of things that can be considered. Most of the time you have a variety of options that can be considered. And when you go through this, or when you present these well-balanced and well-structured arguments, you will have displayed maturity. The other important area that may show sound judgment is the use of assumptions. I will give you a very live scenario. The problem with you is that you don't read the examiner's reports. Now, in one of the examiner's reports, I don't remember which year, there was a question, I think it's a fairly old paper. There was a question that required candidates to, it was an appraisal, an investment appraisal. Okay, an investment appraisal, where the candidates were given certain numbers, they were given the purchase price and all those things that come with project appraisals. Of course, you had the interest rates, the discount rates, but the problem was that it was set in the context of foreign currency. Foreign currency. It was in USD, the quotations were in USD dollars. And yet, the scenario was set, I mean, the reporting currency in the scenario was Uganda shillings. Okay? So, one of the questions for the examiner, rather for the students, was to advise management on quantitative. It didn't even say NPV, because I know students want to hear NPV, IRR, and all those things. The question said, advise management on the quantitative and qualitative aspects of this project that was being considered. Sorry? Yes, I think Apollo University or something like that. Now, the examiners noted that some candidates said that they can't complete the quantitative issues because the machine is being purchased in dollars. That is the worst kind of judgment you can bring at this level. What do you think that candidate should have done? What should I have done? Assume an exchange rate. Assume an exchange rate and go ahead and appraise the project. But you can't say, since the invoice value is in dollars and there is no exchange rate, we are unable. Is that what you can tell a client? Very poor judgment was displayed in that case. Okay. So the use of assumptions, the recognition that you need to make certain assumptions, also demonstrates good sound judgment. And many times you don't have the full information, which is deliberate. Don't think that the examiners, these guys did not set a good case study. The information was not enough. Sometimes it requires you to make assumptions. And that's part of judgment. Okay, it's part of judgment. Communication. This is the easiest skill to get marks on. But unfortunately, the examiners continue to complain about it. Some students, for example, like technical terms. Okay? I strongly recommend that the project should be taken on because, one, it has an IRR, an internal rate of return that is higher than the cost of capital. Very good point. And if you are in a finance class, you probably get 10 out of 10. But in integration, whereas that is a correct statement of fact, it's going to discount your score in communication, depending on the person you are communicating to. If you're writing to a general businessman, an entrepreneur, that will have displayed very poor communication skills. But if you're writing to a fellow professional, that will be okay. Because a fellow professional does not have a problem with understanding an internal rate of return or a cost of capital. But if you're writing to a board member, you need to simplify that language. If you're writing to an audit manager, a finance office CFO, finance manager, head of finance, the language is fine. But other people, it won't be good. So, technical terms. Actually, a good student will even define the technical terms. A good student will have a page that defines technical terms, especially when they are writing to a non-technical person, such as a board member, such as a basic entrepreneur. Okay? An entrepreneur, there are cases where you are dealing with an entrepreneur, he wants a business plan. His interest is in investing money. You can't start telling him about IRR and cost of capital. If you do, make sure you define the terms. Okay? You write to the guy and you say, oh, the NPV is positive, so go ahead and invest. That is finance language, which is very technical. And if you're writing to an entrepreneur, you need to break it down. What does it mean to have a positive NPV? What does it mean to have a positive NPV? Even if it is the board, by the way, don't tell the board that go ahead and invest because the NPV is positive. No, that's not for the board. That's for a fellow professional. The board wants to hear that the project is going to build the wealth or add to the wealth of the company. You're going to build your wealth by this much. Okay? The venture will add to your returns by this much, which is the excess of the internal, what do you call it, internal rate of return and cost of what? And cost of capital. That is communication. Now, I don't know, sometimes maybe, I want to hear, by the way, from you on some of these comments. I don't know whether these are things you know that would come to your mind as you write your examination. An executive summary. Now, many times students write executive summaries, but the examiners think that for some students, Maybe I should hear some thoughts. What do you think is an executive summary? Some of the executive summaries that are presented are not appropriate because they have nothing about the findings or discussions. They have nothing about what is recommended in terms of the key actions that need to be taken. An appropriate introduction of background information. This shouldn't exceed 2-3 paragraphs. Sometimes people write 1 page of a background and they're repeating the facts of the case study. That's a waste of time. You don't need a page of a background. Why are you repeating the materials? In fact, an introduction should only focus on the problem areas. Okay? What are the key problem areas in the case study? Don't start at the introduction and repeat, okay, Polo University was founded in 1967. The university has been in existence for the past 30 years. However, management in the first year did not get a license from the national camp. That is useless. The purpose of the background is to set the context within which the report is being written. And you should only highlight a few key issues about the case study. Key issues, maybe the problem areas in the case study. And it shouldn't exceed half a page. Or even less than that. Okay? Sentence construction that is straightforward. Other issues, these are basics really. Grammar, handwriting, information flow, facts and opinions should not be mixed up. There are statements of fact which will be picked in the case study, but then there should be your opinions as well. Okay? Your opinions reflect the assessment. Your opinions reflect the analytical skills that we talked about earlier. Okay? But then the facts of the case study should also be facts. Okay? The facts should be facts. If the professional accountant recruited, or if the CFO is not a qualified accountant, that is a statement of fact. But then you need to comment on that fact and give your opinion. For example, by assessing the implications of that fact. Okay? So that is communication. Now, presentation. When it comes to presentation, this is generally about the report or the method that you use to communicate your findings. It can take the format of a report. The reports are usually very well structured. Okay? If it's a presentation, you need to know that a presentation is not the same as a report. If they ask you to prepare a presentation cannot be the same as a report. What some students, I don't remember the sitting, but there is a sitting where candidates were asked to prepare a presentation for the board. But what some students presented were, actually the question said you should limit the presentation to about 3 slides. 3 slides. But what some students did was to prepare a report in 3 slides, in 3 pages. Okay? A 3-page report is not the same as a 3-slide presentation. This is a presentation. Bullet, a sentence maximum. Okay? But in a report, you have paragraphs and paragraphs of content. So mind the format of presentation. It can be a memo, a memorandum. A memorandum is simple, to, from, date, subject, and then you hit the issues. It can be a letter, it can be an email. Okay? I think at some point there was also a question that required discussion notes on how you would, notes on things you're going to discuss in an audit entry meeting or something like that. Okay? I will comment on the appendices. Now, appendices are very important, but they are only important if relevant. Okay? Appendices are only important if relevant. Now, I know that during the morning period, people, want to write lots of appendices. But unfortunately, many times those appendices end up irrelevant to the question requirements. Now, don't force them. Because you did your analysis, you want to make sure that you refer to the appendices when they are not adding any value. Okay? I gave an example a candidate can summarize the facts of the case study and call that appendix 1. Not analyze the case material, but summarizes and says founder so and so, capital so and so. This volume sales turnover is this. Then they go to the report and write. They say, for details, refer to appendix 1. Now, when the examiner goes to appendix 1, there is a summary of the case study or facts of the case study. That is no work done. Okay? Only refer to the appendix if it's relevant. By you having done something in the morning, it doesn't mean that you must make reference to it if it is not relevant to your discussion. So relevance is critical for the appendices. I will emphasize this. The skills we're talking about, the analytical skills, the conceptual skills, can only be learned through preparation. You must do practice. Okay? When you go for your tuition and the lecturers you interact with, you must try to practice. Don't just listen or read. You must do practice, and that is what you find in the study materials that the Institute has now provided. Use them, read them, and get guidance from your tutors. But do not go into the exam without having done some sort of practice by looking at some past papers. Take interest in business journals. I told you about current affairs. These current affairs always appear in those exams. Okay, and by looking at these business pages, looking at the business news, you develop your analytical skills and be able to relate current affairs to business problems. In the morning, read the case study and plan the analysis you want to do. Not all analytical tools will be relevant to every case study. So when you get that material in the morning, after you've read it thoroughly, plan the kind of analysis you want to do. Okay? Not every scenario will require a ratio analysis, because you may not have numbers. Not every scenario will require a pestle analysis, because there may not be a lot of macro environment information. Okay? However, most scenarios will require maybe a SWOT analysis. But again, SWOT analysis is not a listing of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's an analysis of those things. Does it make sense? A listing of strengths is not an analysis of the strengths. If you list the strengths that experience, strong capital structure, that's not an analysis. The analysis will say there is a strong capital structure. This means that the company can venture into capital-intensive projects. That is a strength. That is an analysis rather of a strength. So whatever analytical tool you decide to use, make sure you analyze the information in the tool. Do not just list the facts. So as you plan your analysis, decide on what you think is relevant given the context of the case study. Decide on what is relevant. And the approach you decide to take, it's up to you. SWOT is a good one, but it is not good enough if you just list the issues without analyzing them. I know people like to summarize governance issues. That is always a good attempt. But if it is just a summary again, it doesn't add a lot of value and will not be very useful in case you want to make reference to it. When it comes to the afternoon, again, have an answer plan. Your answer plan will, for instance, include a decision on which particular elements you're starting with.